Hey everyone, welcome back to Papa's Workshop. Well, I have a different kind of project today, and it's going to be building a garden deck box. I want to be able to get all the different water hoses and different things up and out of the way so you don't have an eyesore in the yard. And I want to be able to build this using, for the most part, materials that I already have around the shop. Now I'm going to be using some cedar fence slats. I'm going to have some PVC boards that I have extra and some vinyl siding and of course the J-channel. And this box, I'm actually going to put wheels on it because I don't want to have to pick it up and move it around. I want to be able to push it around wherever it needs to go. So I'm going to be putting wheels on this box. And for the lid of this box, I even incorporated some of the old white vinyl fencing material. So like I said, it's a mixture of all different types of materials to create this box. So for the most part, everything that you're going to see in this particular deck box is going to be out of scrap material. Now granted, yes, I did have to go to the store to pick up a little bit of the vinyl siding that I didn't have enough of, but for the most part, all of it is going to be the scrap material that I already had. So it's going to be a little bit different design than what you're used to seeing in a deck box. I also wanted to have the door on it, as you see here, so I can open the door up and have access to it rather than raising the lid up. And I wanted it to be able to blend in with the colors on the house. To begin with, I took the fence slats and ripped them in half. Now on some of the fence slats I have, they were 5.5 inches wide and others were actually 6 inches wide. So I ripped them down in half to be able to get a uniform measurement on that 5.5 cut in half, so basically 2 3/4 inches. From there I took them over to the miter saw and cut them to the proper length. And that gave me all the material that I needed. I'm also going to be using the Titebond waterproof glue to be able to glue all these different components together, in addition to using the 1-inch staples to be able to hold it together. The staples more of acting like a clamp while the glue dries than anything else. The idea behind this is I'm going to be building 3 sides exactly the same. I'm going to be using an overlapping joint. I want to use plenty of glue, and I want to be able to offset this board the distance of the thickness of the fence slat itself. That way it'll actually create a little bit stronger joint. I'm going to use the speed square to make sure that everything is square. Then I'll put that little spacer block in to get the proper distance. Using a stapler, stapled it together to be able to hold everything while the glue dries. By offsetting that board, it makes it where I have a much larger gluing surface and it's easier to assemble all 3 sides of this box. To make the assembly even easier, I'm not actually cutting into the wood to make the half lap. I'm actually putting the board on top of each other and in essence going to create the half lap by just putting this one board on top of the other, supported by the glue and the staples, and then in between I'll fill in the pieces to be able to create a nice strong joint. So this actually works real well, and it really cuts down on the complexity of making an actual half-lap joint. Now because these fence slats were quite old and some of them were really warped pretty bad, I had to grab the pipe clamp to be able to give a little extra persuasion to be able to pull everything back in line and make sure it was good and straight before I glued and stapled everything together. I also realized that some of my fence slats were thicker than the other ones. So I actually had to take and use the joiner and plane down to get the same thickness, as these were quite a bit thicker, and I wanted to be able to have the consistent thickness throughout all 3 of these panels. Now these short boards actually go in between those other ones to be able to provide that, in essence, half lap. So those are ready now, and you can see exactly where they'll go in. So again, I'm going to add plenty of glue to be able to have everything tied together. These will just drop right into place. Same thing over here on this side. Already had the center one installed. This actually creates a half-lap joint without having a half-lap joint that you have to cut on the saw. This is much easier and it gives you a lot of strength. This does, of course, double the thickness of the board, but that's okay. I don't mind having this as a double thick panel to be able to create these half-lap joints without really any effort at all. On the flip side of this panel, I want to add these long boards in, again, to create the double thickness, and it adds the strength that I need, and you can see how that is offset to be able to receive the other side of the panel. This makes assembling the 3 panels very, very easy, plus it gives you a lot of additional gluing surface. It's time to be able to add the wheels to the sides. I'm going to measure back from the front exactly where I want the wheels to be located, and I'm drilling a 1/2 inch hole. You actually can put this really pretty much anywhere that you want. I measured 5.5 inches from the edge and 1.25 inches down to be able to drill my 1/2 inch hole. Originally, the idea was the bolt would just simply slip in, but after looking at this, I realized that the bolt would be sticking up and it would cause a problem installing the vinyl siding. So a little bit of a change to the plan after these holes were all drilled. I had to come back and recess that bolt, and the only way to do that is to countersink with a larger drill bit to be able to go from a 1/2 inch hole all the way through to a countersink of a 7/8 inch bit, and that created a little bit of a problem. The easiest way to handle that is throw in a 1/2 inch dowel rod that gave me the ability to drill that 7/8 inch counterbore that I needed to be able to receive that bolt head. And this is the result. The 7/8 inch diameter drills down to the depth of the bolt head, and then that 1/2 inch hole was already drilled all the way through. Using a 1/2 inch dowel rod like this worked out real well to be able to solve the problem. Is this the only way to be able to do it? No, but it was a simple way to be able to do it at the time, because I was fortunate enough to have a 1/2 inch dowel rod that I could just simply slip into that hole, hold it down with the vise on the workbench, and then drill the hole. And just like that, problem solved. Bolt is now recessed. I'm using the lawnmower wheels to be able to put this on. I'm going to throw in my 1/2 inch washer, put the wheel on, add another washer, and then add a 1/2 inch nut. Now granted, I could use a locking nut, but I didn't have any, so I'm using 2 of the 1/2 inch nuts to be able to put on there to be able to act as a locking nut, which this will work just fine. So with these nuts now tight, check it, make sure that it spins. So all done. 1 down, 3 to go. It's now time to add the J-channel. I'm using a panhead screw to be able to attach the J-channel to this wood frame. And with the double thickness of the wood, there's plenty of thickness. I don't have to worry about drilling all the way through. The panhead screws that I'm using are really just lath screws that I'm using, and they're 3/4 inch long. And that will hold this J-channel just fine. At the bottom of each of the panels, I'm just cutting the J-channel right off square flush with the bottom. And this will be just fine, because what I'm going to do is add a piece of the starter strip across the bottom to be able to receive that vinyl siding. So this works just perfectly fine, and if there's any moisture that gets into this, it'll be able to easily drip out. So now I'm just going to simply add a screw to be able to secure this J-channel in place. To be able to add the starter strip, and yes, this is one of the pieces that I had to buy, I just literally slide it over where it needs to go, and then I'll just take the pencil and mark it and cut it with the tin snips. Now this material is very thin, and it cuts very easily with these tin snips. And then from there, I'll just flip it around to put it where it needs to be and screw it in position. Now this did bend down just a little bit on the end, but it's easy to be able to pull it back into position. Now, with it located correctly right at the bottom, I'll just screw it in place with several screws. Now it's time to add the vinyl siding. And I'll do the same thing. I'll slide it over where it needs to go, and then just take a pencil and mark exactly where I need to cut it. I will use the speed square to be able to make sure that it gets square, and then I'll cut it with the tin snips again. Because this project is such a small job, it's easy to be able to cut this with the tin snips. If I was doing a much bigger job where I had to cut a lot of vinyl, then yes, I could use some other tools. But for something like this, tin snips work just fine. Then it just slides into place, locks into position on that starter strip at the bottom, And then I'll screw in a couple of 3 screws to be able to secure it in place, and then it'll be repeat and do the same thing over again until I reach the top. Putting in that second piece is really not difficult at all. You can just put in the one end where it needs to go, and then just bend the vinyl and pop it in place. Lock it in position, and then screw it in again. So if you've never done any type of vinyl siding work, hopefully you can see just how easy it is to be able to work with this material to be able to have a very professional, nice looking job when you're done, whether it's on a house or if you're working on a project such as this with making a deck box. To install that final piece, all you need to do is just measure the distance from the bottom up to that top edge. Once you have that measurement, transfer it over to your vinyl siding and then make your cut. Again, I'm using the 10 steps to be able to cut this because for me this is the easiest way to do it on this project. From there, all you need to do is just slide it in position. Now you notice this piece is short. That's okay because I'm trying to use every bit of material that I have. So I'm just going to take another small piece and be able to cut it, and I'll fit that in. Now there's a couple of steps that you need to do when you're making this type of a cut, and it's no different than what you have on a house or any other type of project. You want that next piece to overlap the vinyl siding about 1 inch. So I'm going to mark that right where it needs to be, and then I'm going to mark the end to get my full length that I need. Now I'm using the speed square just to make sure that it's this line and it's going to be perfectly straight. But quite frankly, this is such a small piece, it's really not necessary. But I wanted to be able to show you every single step. The next thing you need to do is to be able to have this bottom section cut just a little bit. And again, we're overlapping about 1 inch. So I need to cut away this material right at the very bottom so that it will fit smoothly into that adjoining vinyl siding. And with that done, now it'll slip in perfectly. I'm ready to join the 3 sides together, and to be able to provide some additional strength, I'm putting in these L brackets. This box is going to get a lot of abuse. It's going to be moved around, it's going to have a lot of stuff in it, and these L brackets will provide the extra support in addition to the wood joint itself that's going to be acting as a connector. I have all 3 sides joined. I added this front face piece to be able to receive the vinyl that I'm going to put on the front. But you can see how it's attached, and it gives a lot of gluing surface, plus I have these L brackets to be able to provide a lot of strength to this. I have a white 3/4 inch PVC board that I'm going to cut to fit to be able to put onto this. I cut my PVC board to the proper length, and then I'm going to put it right up here and clamp it in position. Now that little piece of the cedar board that I put in acts as a perfect support to be able to have an attachment point for this PVC. I'm going to clamp this in position so it's exactly where it needs to be, and then simply screw it in from the back side so you will see no screws and no nail holes on the face of this garden deck box. And I'm going to repeat the process on the other side and do the exact same thing. This actually creates the frame that I need to be able to support the door that I'm going to put on next. I built the door exactly the same way as I built the sides. The only difference, I added the PVC board to basically trim it out and make it look really nice. It was real simple to add this PVC board. I'm using the liquid nail, which is a waterproof glue, to be able to put down an ample amount onto this wood. And then from there, I'll just add the PVC board and attach it with this glue. Now to be able to secure it and hold it in place, I'm going to clamp this down to begin with, and then I'm going to flip it over and add the screws to the back of it. So this way, I have the glue that actually holds it, plus I have the mechanical attachment using the screws. And the best thing about it is, of course, there's no nail holes and there's no screws that's going to be showing on the face side. Everything is supported literally on the back of this door. Now to add this J-channel, I simply put the piece in at the corner, mark where it needed to be, and then I can cut this. Once this is cut, then it'll bend and I can continue to the next side. The first two cuts is actually a square cut that's the length of the side that I need. Once I have those two cut, then I cut this 45-degree angle right there. And with that cut, I'm going to trim off some of that excess or the nailing strip, and then it will bend. And that will bend and create my 45-degree angle. Once that's done, I'm going to position it right back into the slot where it needs to go. And it fits perfectly. From there, move over to the other side, mark it exactly the correct length, and then I'll repeat and make my second cut. And I'm going to repeat this process on all four of the sides. Now you notice I'm using a glove. Yes, I have the glove on because when I'm using the tin snips, my thumb always gets a rub and it breaks the skin. So I need that glove to be able to protect it a little bit. So if your skin is thin like mine is there on the top of my hand, you'll need to have a glove to be able to help protect it. Now this J-channel is very easy to be able to cut, and making these joints where it creates that 45-degree look is actually quite easy to do. And hopefully I've been able to explain that to you well enough in this video. If you have any questions, by all means, let me know. Now this J-channel is still pretty long, and I had to swing it over my head to be able to have it drop into place. But I'm ready to cut this final piece right now and finish this up. To make this final cut, it's almost the same as the rest of them, except you have to cut the square portion actually all the way off. You still make your 45-degree cut. You still trim away the excess pieces and get those out of the way. And then the last thing you'll do is just cut it off to length. And we'll make that little snip right there, and it'll free up the J-channel. And you can see I still had a pretty good length left over. But now at this point, this will just drop in place and it'll create the same look as the other three corners. A nice 45-degree corner that looks great. All that's left is to add the screws to be able to hold the J-channel in place, and this part will be completed. Next, we'll add the vinyl the same way as we did before. I just simply cut it to length, snapped it in, screwed it across the top where the wood is located, and then I'm using scrap material just to finish this up. And this is one example. I have enough length there to be able to get that piece, and I have just a tiny little bit of scrap that was left over. But I'll repeat this process now for each of these different vinyl siding pieces that I need to add into this opening. The vinyl siding actually locks into itself from that top of that one piece to the bottom of the next, and then you just simply add the screws. And I'm adding 3 screws, one in the middle and one on each side, and that's all that's necessary. I did add one wheel at the bottom just to give a little bit more support if it was necessary. So I have a small wheel that I'm attaching to the bottom of this door. Not really sure if that is going to be necessary, but why take a chance? I don't want this door to sag. Having this little wheel there will ensure that that will not happen. So the last step is I added the door to that opening with the 2 hinges, added the handle and the little lock. The top of it was nothing more than an old piece of the vinyl fencing that I screwed to the top. And voila, I have it finished. And I think this is a pretty good use for a piece of old vinyl fencing to be able to act as the top. And yes, I did screw this on because I'm really not planning to have any access other than the access of this door. So this was a lot of fun to be able to build this deck storage cabinet. And yes, it was using some different techniques because those half joints, not really half joints, but yet they are. And I think that was a very easy way to be able to do it. And that's something that you might be able to incorporate in some of the projects that you have around your house if you don't want to go to the trouble of actually cutting a true lap joint on a table saw. I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, by all means, give me a thumbs up, subscribe right down below, and I look forward to seeing you in the very next video. So for now, everyone, bye-bye. Can't wait to see you real soon in the shop.